What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. And it is Thursday, April 20th, 2017. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The world is just going crazy. Maybe Earth is actually an insane asylum for the United Federation of Planets or something. Did it just drop all the really crazy human beings onto this rock and say, that's all we got to deal with these people? Because you have to wonder with all the stuff that's going on around here. You probably heard the breaking news. There's been a shooting incident in Paris. At least 2 attackers. Some police have been killed, or at least 1 police officer in the Champs-Élysées. 1 suspect has been shot and killed. 1 other is still being searched for. Central Paris in a lockdown. It's becoming a lifestyle over there. State of emergency. And what's really interesting, this is only happening just 3 days before the start of the elections. And so this is going to have a tremendous impact in terms of the question of the open borders issue. Because all of this craziness has happened ever since France's government got on board the New World Order agenda and said, we're going to go ahead and open the borders and anybody can come on here. We're not going to check if you're criminals. We're not going to check if you're carrying contagious diseases. I mean, we got a really good healthcare system in France. If you make people sick, well, we can handle that. So we're going to see what's going on with that. Trump and the Italian Prime Minister are having a press conference. Still don't know exactly what they're saying yet. We're going to have to catch up on that one as well. Anyway, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone. Getting on back to the war zones, more and more people are speaking out against this story about Assad gassed his own people, and they're trying to up the ante, saying that the UN chemical weapons inspectors have found traces of sarin gas in the area. But we've been down that road before when they were trying to claim that Iraq had chemical weapons. And the question was raised if the U.S. representative on the team had actually used one of the reference samples to contaminate the environment, and they asked the U.S. for the reference sample, and the U.S. just burned the sample. So no comparison could be made on that. So, again, it doesn't matter what chemical test you do. The story was absurd on the face of it, and everybody's saying, yeah, that's basically what it was. And we're seeing articles in places like Raw Story, where Trump's missile attack on Syria was justified with fake intelligence. This is coming from various experts, intelligence experts, and basically saying it's fabricated intelligence, just like Saddam's nuclear weapons. How many more times do you have to be lied to before you're ready to stand up and shout at the government and the corporate media, you guys are full of it and I am not listening to you anymore? Now, as you know, that MIT professor is out there, and he's come out with more observations, basically saying that the videos by the white helmets don't seem to actually match Idlib itself in terms of the geology, the visible weather, and so forth. And we put up another video on whatreallyhappened.com where the white helmet shows how they fake videos. They're actually saying, yes, we're manufacturing the propaganda here. Now, the Russian Defense Ministry is questioning the videos. It's coming from the white helmets, which we know have a bias. They're being promoted as the good guys. They've got a documentary and an Academy Award, and they're wonderful. You should believe them because they've got an Oscar. And again, it's just more fakery here. Now, another analysis that is contradicting the OPCW. The OPCW is saying their first tests are showing there might be traces of sarin gas in the area. But other observers are looking at what happened, and in particular, the lack of protective clothing for the rescuers. If sarin had been used, touching the victims with ungloved hands would contaminate the rescuers. They'd get sick, or they would die. And basically, the visible evidence is consistent with the use of chlorine gas, which we know the U.S.-backed rebels have been using. In any event, remember, Mike Pence actually admitted the cruise missile attack into Syria and the Moab bomb into Afghanistan were done to bluff Kim Jong-un down in this confrontation. And that's as much as admitting that the cruise missile attack was based on a false flag, justified with a false flag. They were saying, we need to show our muscle in Syria, we need to show that we mean business, we just need an excuse. Well, we'll say that Assad gassed his people again, and those Americans, they're too stupid to remember how we were caught lying about Assad gassing his own people in 2013 and 2014. So the story once again is mutating. They're pulling off the chemical weapons attack because nobody's buying it. And Nikki Haley is now going back to the need for a humanitarian intervention in Syria. The justifications keep changing. Assad is a tyrant. No, Assad wins his elections. Well, Assad is using chemical weapons on his own people. No, that's not him. Well, we need a humanitarian war. Any excuse that will work to keep the war going. And the bombs keep on dropping, and innocent people keep on being killed. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And again, they're just looking for something the American people will buy into to continue this militarist intervention in Syria. Now, close on to 6 years, they've been trying to get rid of Assad. And again, it reminds me of that old TV series, Get Smart. There was a running gag with Maxwell Smart, who was a secret agent. Would you believe there's an entire battalion of troops surrounding this hideout at this very moment? No, I wouldn't believe that. Would you believe there's a squadron of police outside ready to bust down the door? No, I wouldn't believe that. Would you believe there's 2 Boy Scouts and a toothless Doberman? And it would just deteriorate. And that's what our government is sound like. Would you believe Assad is a tyrant? No, we don't believe that. Would you believe Assad is gassing his own people? No. Would you believe there's a humanitarian need? No, we don't believe that either. We don't believe anything this government says anymore. Fool me once, so forth and so on. Needless to say, following the call for a new humanitarian war, foreign powers are increasing their support to the militants in Syria. So they're sending in all kinds of humanitarian white phosphorus and all kinds of humanitarian bombs and all kinds of humanitarian guns and all kinds of humanitarian bullets. Because if you're killed with a humanitarian bullet, it's much, much better than being killed with, well, anything else. The logic goes. As long as we can say it's humanitarian, that makes it okay. No, it's a big, fat lie. There's no such thing as a humanitarian war because war is inhumane by definition. Now, moving right along here. Yesterday we were reporting on a rumor, and we did stress it was a rumor, that ISIS leader Baghdadi had been captured in northern Syria. President Assad's office has refuted that, saying it was just a rumor. Baghdadi is not known to be captured by anybody. Now, once again, over at the United Nations, Russia has blocked a U.S.-drafted United Nations statement condemning North Korea tests. And basically, they were responding to the failed test over the weekend. How dare you test? How dare you test? Do you realize how ridiculous that is? To sanction a nation for merely testing defensive weapons. That's how absurd this has gone on. Russia vetoed the Security Council resolution because they wanted language included stressing the need to achieve a solution through negotiation and dialogue, and the current resolution was basically, no, we're going to go on in and whoop North Korea because they're doing things that we don't like. And I guess because that UN Security Council resolution failed, more sanctions are being piled on North Korea by the United Nations to stop World War III. And I have a question for anybody who's connected with the United Nations. The United States is the only nation in history that has actually used nuclear weapons of mass destruction on the civilians of another country. Why isn't the United Nations worried about those nukes? They're always going after nuclear weapons held by nations who have never actually used them. And they never talk about the nuclear weapons possessed by the one nation that has proven it is psychotic enough to actually do so. Seems to be a little bit of blindness over there at the UN. Now, over at the Express, they're saying, well, there's another way. Donald Trump could relist North Korea as a terrorist sponsor to increase pressure on Kim Jong-un. Now, you need to take a good look at that list of nations that sponsor terror, because no proof has ever been offered for any of the nations that are actually on there. And nobody's offering any proof that North Korea is a state sponsor of terror. Meanwhile, nations that are known to be sponsoring terror in other countries like the United States, Great Britain, and Israel somehow fail to make that list. It's just another piece of propaganda. They're on the state sponsor of terror list. Ooh, they must be bad. I will believe that they're bad. No, they're just targets. And being a target doesn't automatically make you bad. It just makes you a target. Remember what we were saying yesterday about the North Korea opium link. Kim Jong-un originally banned opium, but now because of all the economic sanctions and pressure, he's yielding to the inevitable, and the poppies are blooming, and they're not under the control of the CIA. So the North Korean opium is cutting into the CIA's action, and worse, the competition is starting to drive the price down. So just like the mafia, they're going to go on over and they're going to do a hit on the competition. We don't want the competition over here. We're going to do a hit. We're going to send the button man, take care of you. That's exactly how the U.S. government is working. Now, Donald Trump is already saying that he's going to extend his armada for an extra month off the coast of North Korea. Now, a lot of people are still going on back to how we were hearing all last week about the Vinson was off the coast of North Korea, was going to be joined by the Ronald Reagan, which is still hopelessly radioactive from Fukushima, and the USS Nimitz, and it turned out to be completely fake. And experts are saying that this idea of saying the Carl Vinson was off the coast of North Korea when it was actually down in Indonesia, it's hurting America's credibility. This comes as a tremendous shock to me, because I didn't think the U.S. government had any credibility left. But apparently there is some out there to be found, and the continued lies are wearing it away. Now, to try and cover up the fact that they were bluffing North Korea, the latest excuse from the White House is, well, the Carl Vinson went off to Indonesia instead of North Korea because there was a miscommunication between the White House and the Pentagon, where the White House called up the Pentagon and said, send the Carl Vinson to North Korea, and the Pentagon said, right you are, Indonesia it will be. That's what they're claiming. And it's one of those excuses that isn't thought all the way through, because if they weren't trying to bluff Kim Jong-un, and there really was an order to send the Carl Vinson off the coast of North Korea, and it wound up being sent to Indonesia, it has revealed to the entire world that the U.S. military chain of command are a bunch of goof-offs. They're incompetents. Which side of the planet was I supposed to have that ship on? I forget. I got it on a Post-it note around here someplace. I don't see it right now, but I'm pretty sure I have it on a Post-it note. Military always talk about C-cubed. Command, control, communication. That it is essential to proper battle management. And this cover story for the attempt to bluff down Kim Jong-un is basically saying that battle management is as deeply flawed in the U.S. as the F-22, the Gerald R. Ford, so forth and so on. Now, George H. Whitman, founder of the National Institute for Public Policy, is saying war with North Korea is inevitable and that the U.S. should launch a full-scale attack right now. Okay, George, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, here's your Dayglow orange jumpsuit. Watch your head climbing into that transport plane, and we're going to call Kim Jong-un and tell him that you are personally on your way there to kick his butt. And the rest of us are going to sit this one out. Because we, the people of the United States of America, are sick and tired of being lied into war after war after war after war. Every intervention since the end of World War II, we're told we're bringing democracy to those people, and they never get it. They get a tyrant and fake elections to make it look like a democracy, like they did in Ukraine. Now, there are some other issues out there that need to give us all pause. We mentioned this before. The Union of Concerned Scientists has issued a statement warning that the Pentagon is dangerously overconfident in the U.S. ballistic missile defense system. Because every time it's been tested, the people running the missiles, they know where the threat's coming from, what course it'll be on, what speed it's on, what altitudes it's on, and there is a homing beacon in there. A courtesy that an enemy is not likely to provide if we are really to be attacked. And again, go on back to that movie, The Pentagon Wars. It's available on the net. You can watch it there. It is very funny. But it's based on a true story of what military procurement is like, in particular in the case of this film, the Bradley infantry fighting vehicle. And it's all about making money. It's all about getting promotions. It's all about getting post-retirement jobs with the defense contractors. And what is being produced is junk on the theory that it will never actually have to be used, so it's okay for us to cheat the tests, which has happened a lot, and not just with the Bradley. So, now, we found this story from a couple of years ago where experts are saying aircraft carriers, which form the mainstay of our naval forces, holdover thinking from World War II, and championed by Donald Trump, are actually quite vulnerable to attack. This is coming from Roger Thompson. He's a defense analyst and a professor at Kyunghee University in South Korea. And he says you need to pay attention to the powerful anti-ship weapons developed in recent years by potential enemies, including China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And he's saying these carriers are more targets than weapons. And the new weapons include land-based ballistic missiles that are designed to hunt down and kill large ships. China's Dongfeng 21 is an anti-ship missile which has a range of 1,100 miles and moves at Mach 10. Far too rapidly for the close-in weapon system, the phalanx, to engage. And if they put a nuclear weapon on there anyway, even if they engage the phalanx a mile out, the Dongfeng a mile out, and it still goes off, you're going to lose the fleet. Some of the Russian and Chinese submarines can fire precision-guided cruise missiles. Again, specific anti-ship, and they have so many they can overwhelm carrier fleet anti-missile defenses. Russia, China, and Iran have also developed what is called the super-cavitating torpedo. These form an air bubble in front of them, which basically gets rid of the boundary layer of water and allows them almost frictionless travel through the water. And they can travel at hundreds of miles per hour. And they're difficult to avoid at that speed, difficult to intercept at that speed. Now, this article is saying the supercavitating torpedoes cannot be guided. I would not want to bet a carrier on that. It's just off the top of my head, I can think of a couple of different ways you could actually get an active guidance system in there, even with that insonified layer around it. Now, I want to do a flashback here because a lot of people are concerned about a new false flag. The American people don't believe in the government. They're not going to march off to another war unless something happens that is so scary and terrifying that our brains will shut down, we'll salute the flag, and we'll march our children into the meat grinder and sing patriotic songs while doing it. And so it's worthwhile looking back at the run-up to Pearl Harbor, where documents that surfaced after it was all over literally revealed a discussion President Roosevelt had with his military commanders about suckering the Japanese into attacking Pearl Harbor, and even a discussion of how many ships Roosevelt was willing to sacrifice to get his war going. He was willing to sacrifice 7. They really only lost 3. All the others were put back into commission. Would they do that again off North Korea? Yeah, and they got a bunch of really good ships that would make excellent sacrificial lambs in a false flag. More when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. So remember back in March of 2011, tsunami, earthquake, meltdown at Fukushima, and they were saying, well, it wasn't that bad. There wasn't that much radiation. It was all hydrogen explosions, nothing to worry about. I remember this one time when they came on out with a radiation number that was just horrific. and apparently consistent with a reactor meltdown. And then 24 hours later, they said, no, it's not that bad. An engineer made a mistake with his calculator. Nothing to see here. Move along. Well, the U.S. Participated in the relief efforts following that. And 16 U.S. ships used in the Fukushima relief, including the aircraft carrier, the Ronald Reagan, are still contaminated with radiation. And there's been this big stink here about how sailors who continued to work on those ships have started coming down with radiation-related illnesses. They're calling it low-level radiation, which means it doesn't kill you immediately, but it still, with sufficient exposure, can make you ill. So the U.S. Navy right now has 16 ships, including a carrier, that really are not usable for any length of time. You have to keep flipping the crews in and out of there, which involves training and all kinds of other problems. So already the U.S. Navy has a bunch of ships that they could sacrifice in a false flag and then blame North Korea or who knows for it, have them sunk on somebody else's coast, and make our radioactive waste problem their radioactive waste problem. Because whatever false flag is going to happen is going to have to be big. Airplanes into buildings, been there, done that, didn't even buy the T-shirt. It's passé now. Story coming, actually we're going to take a phone call. Tom in Texas, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, Michael.
Howdy.
Man, you need to chill out. You are on fire today. Miss Claire, bring out that bottle of scotch, roll in the fat joint, and you know what I'm thinking, Mike? There's nothing me or you can do. I mean, you're on fire. You can do this, but myself, I'm trying my best to make sense of everything and the situations going on. We're helpless.
I respectfully disagree with you, and again I go back to Lyndon Johnson's autobiography, which says that when he looked out the Oval Office windows and saw 1 million Americans on that mall rejecting the war in Vietnam, that is the moment he realized they had lost it. And what we really need to do, if we don't want mushroom clouds all over our country, we need to get 5 million people to march on Washington, D.C. peacefully and just say, we know you're lying about these wars. We know this is all about making rich people even richer than they already are, and we are not going to pay for this.
The thing about it is, Mike, we cannot go peacefully because we got the left-wingers that are with sticks and stones and they want to do everything. And who's actually in control of the Pentagon? It's not the president.
Yeah, a lot of people are very concerned about that our government has already fragmented. We know that the NSA has been rogue, the CIA's gone rogue, and now it looks like in some cases the Pentagon may be going rogue. In fact,
it is.
We don't even know who really ordered that cruise missile attack. Trump is going to have to say that he did, or he's going to telegraph to the world that he's not really in charge of the country anymore. And it's a very awkward position for him to be in.
I can't believe that I voted for him. And,
imagine,
that he'll be able to retire and be Miss Claire's roadie and everything. But now, after what's going on now, there's no way. Man, there's no way.
I agree. I was really hoping that things were going to get better for us, and that Claire and I are at retirement age, and there's no way it's going to happen unless they give me Bill O'Reilly's job or something like that, and I do that for a few years. I'm hideously disappointed in Donald Trump. I still think it would have been just as bad, if not worse, under Hillary Clinton. But again, what this last election and the current events are teaching us is the occupant of the Oval Office isn't really all that powerful. The problem is the system as a whole is basically running the country. We are a dictatorship. We're not able to rule ourselves. The United States that we're taught that we live in the public schools doesn't really exist. We've been admiring and worshiping a ghost that died a long, long time ago. Tom, got to let you go and do another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently Trump and the Prime Minister of Italy have just finished their little press conference. And, of course, they're extending their condolences to the victims of this latest shooting in Paris. But apparently the substance of the talks is that Italy, as you know, is in a major financial crisis. And Italy is simply saying they cannot afford to pay more to be in NATO. And one of Trump's campaign issues was addressing the fact that the United States taxpayer, that means you, bears a disproportionate burden of the cost of maintaining NATO. And that Trump said everybody ought to pay their fair share, which sounds pretty good, pretty fair to me. And now Italy's saying, no, we can't. So it looks like, I mean, we know that Donald Trump is not going to disband NATO. He's done an about-face on that already. So it looks like we're going to go back to status quo ante, and it raises a couple of issues here. Story coming out of WilliamEngdahl.com asking if Euroland is on the verge of disintegration. And he's talking about all the issues, the Brexit vote, Marine Le Pen's possible winning of the presidency, all these countries that are now refusing migrants, even while sanctioned by the EU, and basically saying the European Union experiment is coming apart at the seams. And it certainly is. As far as I can see, it's only a matter of time. The only thing that's going to weld Europe back together is a war with Russia, and maybe that's another reason why they're doing that. Paul Craig Roberts is out there basically talking about an invisible Trump presidency, because he's certainly out there marketing his presidency, hats and watches, and he travels around the world getting photo ops with all these world leaders. But it's Mike Pence who's over there in North Korea talking war. And even Dick Cheney didn't overshadow his boss to this degree. Pence is acting like he's already the commander-in-chief. Paul Craig Roberts is saying maybe for all intents and purposes he already is. And that certainly would explain the sudden reversal of the administration, because Mike Pence is very much on board with the establishment and the deep state. All right, let's grab some phone calls here. Billy in Pennsylvania, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good.
Love your show, man. Keep up the good work. You're a true patriot.
Thank you.
That's okay, man. You make my day. I watch you all the time. And anyway, of course, I listen to you and watch you and stuff. I kind of was trying to put the puzzle together on why Trump is doing the things he's doing. And I'll go over it real quick, and then, of course, I would love your opinion on and what you think about it. Exhibit A, Jesse Ventura went to another talk show. I don't know if it was Alex Jones or whatever, but he explained to Alex Jones that when he got the governorship, he was met by some board of directors right after he was elected. And, you know, after they congratulated him and he had chicken wings or whatever, they said, well, this is how it's going to be. We're running the show. And the pressure got so bad after a while with the threats, and he said that they had threatened his family. And so he eventually quit, or I don't know what happened, but that's the story I heard. And so that's Exhibit A. And Exhibit B is, I think they had the same talk with Trump, just like you said about the Zapruder film. And another reason why I think this happened also was back in JFK's administration during his first year, he was given papers about false flag attacks where they were going to nuke or bomb certain areas of the United States, false flag it and blame it on Russia to start a war. Mm-hmm. Well, JFK, unknowing the consequences, of course, did the right thing and said, man, we don't do business like this. So I think the same thing is happening now. And the proof is the papers that General Wesley Clark brought to the public, at least not the papers, but to the attention of the public about the overtaking of the Middle East, starting with Iraq and then moving to Syria, blah, blah, blah. I think it was 7 countries over there. Well, I think this plan is like they're pushing it forward real hard, and it's the original plan that General Wesley Clark was talking about. I think it's the same thing, and it's coming to life in front of everyone's eyes. And I think they've threatened Trump to make him do their bidding, to where you just got done saying about the vice president is pretty much taking the reins. I mean, how much more proof do we need?
Well, we don't really need that much proof, and at this point, I mean, there's a whole bunch of possibilities. There were rumors that they got something that they could destroy Trump with when he was down on Epstein's Island. And by the way, we posted a flashback story where one of the girls who had been working with Epstein at his home in Palm Beach, where he was arrested, and that's why he moved off to the Caribbean so he could keep doing what he's doing. They confirmed cameras and microphones all over the place, and one of the young lovelies who'd been there said that, yeah, Epstein was planning on blackmailing everybody who came over to his place and had a little bit of fun. So that's another rumor. But you know something? At this point, it doesn't matter anymore. Okay, let us deal with the reality that Donald Trump is not delivering what he promised. Let us deal with the reality that we are finally beginning to understand the presidency doesn't really have that much power. The strings are being pulled from the shadows. It reminds me very much of that wonderful Jackson Browne song, Lives in the Balance. I think we posted a video set to it a week ago. And we are not getting the country that we were taught we live in. We're not getting the country that we want to have when we sign that 1040 form. The reality is that we live under an oligarchical structure that sees us all as nothing more than walking wallets, to be labor, to harvest for wealth, to sell bad products to, and to breed new workers and new soldiers along the way. And that is it. We're viewed as livestock. They see themselves as the Morlocks, and we are the Eloi, to be fed upon.
Yeah, I really think the basis of all this is unfolding right before all of our eyes, is that mission that General Wesley Clark was talking about all the countries are going to overthrow, starting with Iraq and then moving on to this country and then moving on to that country. I think it's really unfolding.
Yes,
I think it's the same plan that they had with the Bush administration. It's just taken them this long to really, move forward with it.
Well, they ran into a lot of trouble, a lot of resistance, and yes, there's no doubt they're still following that plan, because ultimately the real agenda in this war has not changed one bit, and that is to bring the rest of the world back under the hegemonic domination of the U.S. Federal Reserve note, by means fair and foul, and it's unfortunately mostly foul.
No, I totally support everything you're saying, man, and I really think that the private central banks is really the Moloch of all of it, man. That is like the Luciferian, whatever, controlling all of it, man. It's like just totally evil.
It's a scam that has been played on the human race for 300 years, and it is not a system of economics. It's not even a system of banking. It's a system of enslavement by instilling in the people a belief in a debt obligation to this imaginary made-up money, and then to use that belief in a debt obligation to control a nation and its people. I'll give you an example. The Second Bank of the United States, which was a private central bank, when Andrew Jackson succeeded in ending their charter, where they were not allowed to just create their own money anymore, the Second Bank of the United States tried to operate like a regular depositor bank, and they went bust after only 2 years, because they didn't really know anything about real banking. It's a legalized counterfeiting operation. And so when we talk about banks, depositor banks, your neighborhood bank and everything, that is a powerful tool for social organization of the surplus wealth in the community. But these private central banks are tools of enslavement.
I remember on one of your shows you mentioned something about greenbacks, and Abraham Lincoln got away from the Federal Reserve, and without all the conspiracy theories and all, do you really think that was one of the agendas why maybe Booth was manipulated to think, well, we're killing him for the South and all, but the real agenda behind it was Lincoln was getting away from the Federal Reserve too? I mean, I remember you mentioned that on one of your shows.
Okay, well, there wasn't a Federal Reserve in and of itself in Lincoln's day, but by creating his own greenbacks, he avoided having to borrow from the existing banks of the day to finance the Civil War. and the greenbacks worked really well, and Abraham Lincoln announced he was going to continue the process after the war, and that, of course, was a threat to the profits of the bankers. And yes, that was probably, if not the primary motive, certainly one of the ones for his assassination. And it's all laid out in my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, and that one article of mine has probably reached more people on planet Earth and had more of an influence than anything else I've done in the last 23 years. So if you have not already read it, please read it. You can go up to the top of the website. That little gray box underneath the banner are some permanent articles, and right there on the very top row, second from the left-hand side, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, and it's all laid out in there. Not just Abraham Lincoln, but John F. Kennedy as well.
Yeah. Hey, one last thing. Is there any way that you could get that information about General Wesley Clark, that plan that... Is there any way to get that? Maybe one of your other listeners can get a hold of that and post that, because I think that's huge. I mean, it's laying everything out that these people are doing.
Democracy Now! Actually interviewed him, and he just told the story. I mean, you can go out and do a web search on it, a DuckDuckGo search on it, and you can find it. It's not a big, deep, dark secret. Wesley Clark blew the whistle back in 2005 that the U.S. government had an agenda to conquer all the oil-producing nations of the Middle East and shackle them permanently to the U.S. dollar in order to keep the rest of the world's economies subservient to the U.S. Federal Reserve note. That's what this war is all about. This clash of civilization is really a war between banking systems, and they're going to kill millions of our children in this argument over whose brand of ink and paper we're supposed to be enslaved to for the next 100 years.
And sometimes if you don't, keep it out there, sometimes the information is forgotten. And after listening to you, I'm a constant follower of your show. And then I was thinking, man, this sounds an awful lot like that same agenda that the Bush administration had, and Wesley and General Clark blew the whistle on them. Well, here it is.
Yeah, it is. No question about that. I'll hunt down that videotape and I'll post it to the website. Okay.
Thank you, man. You're the best. Have a great one.
All right, same to you. We're going to switch over to Tom in Indiana. Tom, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
Aloha.
Aloha, Nune.
Hear me?
Yes, I hear.
Anyway, on our local talk show, they threw out the question: who would you'd like to have replace O'Reilly? And I put your name out.
Oh, good, because
and I said this guy.
I could use a pay increase.
I said, this guy knows where all the bodies are buried, and he knows the news 2 days before anybody else does.
Well, the one problem with that, I would love to have the money. I'd love to build Claire a new recording studio. I'd love to be able to actually have something to retire on. But the reality is, those people in the corporate media are paid those vast sums of money. I mean, Bill O'Reilly's getting $25 million just to leave. And I mean, that's how obscene the money is. But they're paid that money because they're very good liars, and they will tell the lies their bosses tell them to. And I won't do that, which is why I'm going to spend the rest of my life broke.
Well, it's still refreshing to listen to you every day. I appreciate it very much, and hope you come to Indiana sometime again.
Yeah, well, we were there just a short while ago to admire a new member of the family and everything, and Indiana's very nice. I liked it. I'm originally a farm kid, so if we can get together the money to get back to the mainland, it's probably going to be someplace, unless some company hires me and says, you will live in our city and you will use our studio. It'll probably be someplace between Indiana and New England, because that's kind of where our family's all scattered around.
Okay, well, aloha, man.
All right, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to take one more phone call here before the commercial break. David in Florida, aloha. What's on your mind?
Am I on?
You're on the air.
Okay. Hey, Mike, is there any way to tell if the quote-unquote popular uprisings that we see on the news are legitimate, and what are some of the things that we should look for?
Well, one of the things you need to look at is violence tends to work against whatever those who are being violent seem to espouse. And that is why I tend to view all of these violence incidents as false flags, as being staged. Because if you have a group of people who are really trying to bring about socio-political change in their society, the one thing they can't move forward without is the support of the general population. And if you go on out and you commit acts that turn the general population against you, your agenda is lost right at that point. Imagine if George Washington and Thomas Jefferson had run around the colonies shooting into schools and killing children. How far would the American Revolution have gotten? And the answer is not at all. And so I tend to look at what's going on with all this violence at Berkeley. It does appear to be staged, especially this last week, where you have these people out there beating up other people there, beating up the pro-Trump people and screaming about, where's his tax returns, where's his tax returns? It's like they ran out of anything else to complain about because Trump has been co-opted by the deep state here. And so they're out there staging a violent riot over tax returns. That really is absurd on the face of it. Personally, I'm far more interested in Hillary's deleted emails than in Donald Trump's tax returns.
Well, I was thinking in terms of Venezuela and you know, all those South American countries. I can't tell who's the legitimate president and if it's a George Soros type of operation where the crowd is trying to overthrow them. You know, I mean, it's just plain as day that there's some power in the world that's trying to overthrow individual country by individual country.
Yeah, the U.S. has been after Venezuela since the time of Hugo Chavez. They even orchestrated a coup d'etat that succeeded in pulling him out of office, but he was back after about a week. And the United States has been waging economic war on Venezuela because Venezuela dares to spend the Venezuelans' money on the Venezuelan people, and that sets a bad example. We can't have taxpayers insisting the government spend the taxes on the people, and we got to do something about that. And Venezuela also had a bad habit of selling their oil for currencies other than the U.S. dollar. They were selling oil, still are selling oil to China for the yuan, and that is something that the United States wants to bring an end to. Again, getting back to that Wesley Clark revelation, is that the U.S. wants all cross-border trade and banking to be denominated in U.S. dollars, off of which the U.S. financial centers will make a huge profit. All right, got to let you go here, David. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Let's get on back to the war stuff here. Kind of an interesting article here over at Sputnik News. Moab, the grotesque game of good bombs versus bad bombs. And basically, it's a very subtle, constant aspect of the corporate media propaganda that our bombs are somehow good and blessed by the imaginary playmate in the sky and stand for Mom Apple Pie and the flag, and the other people's bombs are all evil, 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 evil. And we see how the United States screams about chemical weapons use in Syria at the same time they're using chemical weapons in other countries. It's a double standard. It's okay when the U.S. government does it. It's bad when they do it. And if you're a loyal, patriotic American, you will not notice the obvious double standard. Now, apparently at the location where that Moab hit, U.S. troops, and yes, we have U.S. troops in Afghanistan, they're fighting ISIS fighters at the site. So it's looking to me like maybe that Moab didn't actually hit a major military target. Maybe those tunnels were empty and not being used anymore. Because remember, they were left over from Charlie Wilson's war. But apparently there's still plenty of ISIS fighters in the area despite the Moab. Now, here's an article. This is coming out of Stephen J. Linman. Is Trump heading for war on Iran? Yes, the indications are out there. They're trying to link Iran now to everything that's going on. Yemen is firing Iranian missiles into Saudi Arabia. Iranian experts helped Yemen hack a Patriot missile and shoot down the Saudi helicopter. Iran is helping Iraq. Iran is doing this. Iran is doing that. And so, yeah. And we know, again, on that list that Wesley Clark leaked out, and I did just post that video to whatreallyhappened.com, Iran was the last name on that list. Another story coming out of antiwar.com. The State Department is trying to torpedo the P5+1 nuclear deal, even though everybody who's looked at it, including Donald Trump, is saying Iran is complying with all of their promises in the P5+1 nuclear deal. The United States is not. And we had Rex Tillerson out there trying to justify the U.S. reneging on another agreement by saying, well, Iran is a state sponsor of terror. Oh, where's your proof? Well, we can't reveal the proof. It's classified. It would reveal sources and methods. You just take our word for it. Rex, did you know the word gullible is not in the dictionary? And it is out there. Now, Iranian Defense Minister, Brigadier General Hossein Degan, responded to that comment about how Yemen was using Iranian missiles to fire into Saudi Arabia. And he came on out and said, you need to look at all these terrorists who are currently using American-made weapons. Because that's who's sending in the machinery of death to the Middle East, not Iran. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And continuing on with this insanity out there. China has said they are going to sign Iran's Iraq reactor deal Sunday. And basically Chinese companies, Iranian and Chinese companies, are signing this commercial contract to redesign the Arak heavy water nuclear reactor in central Iran and basically bring it up to date here and to keep it in compliance with the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, where Iran is allowed to have nuclear reactors as long as they are not producing bomb stuff. And Iran is saying, okay, we really don't want bombs anyway. Now, interestingly enough, out at The Hague, they have rejected Kiev's claims that Russia is supporting the breakaway republics in the east. Now, the lawsuit is far from being completed. It's going to take a long, long time. But the UN court said that Kiev was unable to prove that the Kremlin is sending weapons, soldiers, or money to Ukraine, and questioning whether the revolutionaries in the eastern Ukrainian republics really deserve to be called terrorists. Of course, in this day and age, everybody's being called a terrorist. Now, at this point, we should be prepared for a dodge, because remember, Ukraine bought these old, junked-up Russian tanks a while ago. They were sold for their scrap metal value, and they're really not of use to Ukraine because Ukraine doesn't use this model tank. They don't have parts, they don't have the support infrastructure, but they could be repainted in Soviet colors, because the Soviet Union is still using this model tank, and they could be planted somewhere inside Ukraine and then bombed and set fire to. Say, see, Russia's invading. Russia's invading. And faking a Russian invasion of Ukraine right now would solve a lot of the New World Order's problems. Because as I mentioned earlier in the show, it would terrorize the people of Europe into forgetting about all this Brexit and sovereignty and independence stuff, and we need a United States of Europe to deal with the evil Russian Empire. Interesting little story coming out of Investment Watch blog. The U.S. is now bombing Somalia. Any idea why? Well, they're on General Wesley Clark's list. It's their turn in the rotation. Now, a lot of people are very concerned. In an age where the people of the United States and a lot of countries have lost all faith, trust, and belief in their governments, how are they going to move forward on war? And so people are concerned about an upcoming exercise in New York called Gotham Shield 2017, which is a training exercise simulating a terrorist nuclear bomb on New York. And you need to remember that there were training exercises going on around all these other false flags. There was a training exercise in New York on 9/11. There was a training exercise going on during the Boston bombing. It's just the way they do these things. So a lot of people are very, very concerned that there might actually be a real nuclear detonation in the United States. And a little bit of a reminder that the Israeli embassy in New York City is a radiation hotspot. Now, this goes back to the Nuclear Emergency Search Team, or NEST. And it's their job in the event of a runaway nuclear weapon or some kind or contamination to find it. And in order to find it, they had to do, and still do on a regular basis, surveys of major urban areas with aircraft fitted out with very sensitive specialized radiation meters, and they're making what are called baseline maps. The radioactive sources that are known to be there and known to be benign, like isotopes kept in university research labs, radiotherapy machines in hospitals, and that sort of thing, all of which can show up on the equipment. And they need to know the already existing ones so that if there is an emergency, somebody has a nuclear bomb they've brought into the United States of America, they can run a search for it, subtract out the known sites, and locate, as rapidly as possible, the bogus signature. So when they were first starting to do the baseline maps in New York City, they discovered that the Israeli embassy in New York City is putting out a lot of radiation. And the government of Israel will not comment on why that is the case, and they certainly will not allow anybody inside to inspect. So it's a big question mark. Now, you need to remember that Israel's first generation of nuclear weapons, uranium fission bombs, was created with weapons-grade uranium smuggled out of the United States to Israel. It was called the NUMEC scandal, where there was this nuclear fuel reprocessing company that somehow misplaced enough fissionable uranium to build 6 nuclear bombs. And it was a big stink, and it was all hushed up. And if you really think about it, it would have been very trivial for the smugglers to take the material for 5 nuclear weapons to Israel and leave some of it behind. Because once you have that weapons-grade material, building a bomb is easy. If you have any machining skills whatsoever, your basic, simple little boy uranium weapon is basically, it's a tube. And you have 2 subcritical masses of uranium at each end. You bang them together, it goes boom. There. Now you all know the secret of making a nuclear weapon. It's getting that weapons-grade material that is the tricky part. And we cannot rule out the possibility that Israel has kept some of that weapons-grade material that was swiped by NUMEC, being stored at the New York Embassy, and I feel sorry for the embassy staff for all the health problems they're probably dealing with. Plus, that whole Mino Air Force Base situation a few years back where a bomber took off with nuclear weapons on the wing pylons. They claimed it was simply transporting them. You don't transport weapons on the wing pylons. Something funny was going on there, but in all the confusion back and forth, one of those weapons was misplaced. They recovered 5 of them. Nobody knows where the 6th one went, and unfortunately the crew of that aircraft all met with tragic fates shortly thereafter. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, who served over a year as Reagan's Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy, is saying that the United States government has become the world's most dangerous terrorist organization, and I cannot find any single reason to disagree with that. Because if you think about it, drone strikes into other countries are acts of terror. That's exactly why the Nazis were showering London with the V-1 buzz bomb, the world's first cruise missile, and the V-2 ballistic missile, the world's first ballistic missile, and the first man-made object to leave Earth's atmosphere. And they weren't all that accurate. They were getting in and around London, but they weren't able to strike specific military targets with it. It was just a campaign of terror to terrorize the British people into pressuring Winston Churchill to capitulate to Nazi demands. And it didn't work. It hardened those people's resolve to resist. And the same thing is going on in all these countries the U.S. has been drone striking. Because that's what the drone strikes are. They're acts of terror. Look at how reckless they are about designating targets. They're not really going after known terrorists. They've been hitting school teachers in classes. They've been hitting weddings. They've been hitting funerals. It's just random killing, and that is an act of terror. Now, David Steele, He's a 20-year Marine Corps intelligence officer. He's the second highest ranking civilian in the U.S. Marine Corps intelligence. He's a former CIA clandestine services case officer. And he is out there saying every single terrorist attack in the United States was a false flag attack by our own government to scare us into supporting the war agenda. The exact same thing that the Nazis did at Gleiwitz. That was a false flag framed on Poland to launch that war. Another article coming out of TED.com, how this FBI strategy is actually creating U.S.-based terrorists. And they're pointing out how all of these domestic terrorists who are being arrested, they're all being entrapped and set up by the FBI. The FBI undercover informants go on out, they find somebody who's talking about how badly the rest of the world's being treated by the U.S. They buddy up to him and they say, we got to do something about it. We'll get you the weapons. We'll get you the money. We'll get you all this stuff. And then they swoop in and arrest him for the headlines. And we're now coming to understand that the U.S. government has helped to create the 3 worst terror groups in the world. Remember the secret Pentagon report that said the U.S. created ISIS as a proxy to use against Syria's President Assad. The big stink that was hidden inside Hillary's deleted email. Well, they weren't even deleted. It actually came out in the official paperwork. The Obama administration, with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, was smuggling weapons out of Libya following the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi and smuggling them into Syria to give to ISIS and al-Qaeda to use against Bashar al-Assad. Technically, that constitutes an act of treason. Treason is defined as giving aid and comfort to an enemy in time of war. We've all been told there's a war on terror. We've all been told ISIS and al-Qaeda are our enemy. So for Obama and Clinton to be giving weapons to these people, that's aid and comfort. That absolutely matches perfectly the legal definition of an act of treason against the United States of America. Another article out of Global Research. America created al-Qaeda and the ISIS terror group. If you can't find an enemy to scare your people into submission with, you go out and you manufacture one. Article coming out of Sputnik News. Trump administration's shift to more aggressive foreign policy is very dangerous. Yes, it is, especially when it is coupled with the very unpredictable nature of the current White House, where nobody's sure who's really in charge. Everybody sees the recklessness and impetuousness that decisions are being made. Everybody's on a hair trigger. Somebody, just in a moment of panic, not being sure where the boundaries are for the U.S. government, might start pushing buttons, turning little brass keys in the silos. Now, earlier we were talking about Paul Craig Roberts pointing out that Mike Pence is now acting like he's the president. Trump is still out there doing photo opportunities with prime ministers and traveling around the world and having a really good time. But Mike Pence is out there talking about war and we're going to go to war. And he's taking center stage, and that's something vice presidents traditionally do not do. We know that Dick Cheney was driving a lot of George W. Bush's policies for him. But Dick Cheney played the role of being a very quiet, in-the-shadows vice president and let George Bush go on out and mouth the appropriate words. Pence isn't even bothering with that. He's out there on the verge of basically declaring war all on his own. And now we have this other story coming out of Free Beacon that says Jared Kushner is now micromanaging the National Security Council, basically asserting his authority to direct the NSC, even though that is technically the prerogative of the president. So we're looking at a White House that is being run by the senior staff, and President Trump has just been isolated. And as I said when we started to see this policy reversal, I think the deep state has gone to President Trump and said the war agenda is moving forward. There is not a thing that you can do to stop it. Your only choice is, are you going to continue being the president or not? Because if you're not on board with our war agenda, you will be removed somehow. And we have lots of very creative ways to do that. Very scary, scary time. Oliver Stone, who's a fine director, and one of my regrets out of my own career in Hollywood is I never got to work with a guy. And I really wanted to, especially after JFK came out. I really wanted to work with him. But he's out there, and basically he's excoriating Trump, saying that Trump has taken the handcuffs off of the war machine and turned it over to glorified generals. In other words, Stoner's responding to this report that Trump is just letting the Pentagon decide its attacks for itself now. We really may have a government where there is no one individual or entity in charge. It's just all these different rogue outfits, turf fighting with each other, carrying out their own agendas. And by the way, that too was a symptom in the Soviet Union just before it fell apart. Another article from Paul Craig Roberts. What if we don't really govern ourselves? What if our belief in self-government is belief in a myth? And that actually does seem to be what's going on here. Now, I've commented in the past about how the nation I was born into, I've watched it wither away and die like a loved one who's dealing with a lingering fatal illness, and how tragic that can feel. Because when I was a kid, I loved the country I thought I lived in. But more and more I'm coming to understand that that country that I was taught I lived in was already dead long before I was born. And we have been showing reverence for what is, for all intents and purposes, a ghost. The ghost of the nation that used to be here. Now we see before us we have an oligarchy. An entrenched power bloc that will not surrender power, that believes in the use of phony elections to try and get us to believe that somehow or other we've all voted for how badly we are being treated. And it is a myth. That nation that's described in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that's a nation I can be proud of and support, would support. The nation as it really is, the government as it really is, I can't be proud of it. I am appalled by it. I'm ashamed by it. So should you be. Now, story coming out of the politicalinsider.com. Apparently Democrats are still on the rampage because Empress Hillary was not crowned when they wanted it to. And apparently, Congressman Earl Blumenauer is introducing a bill that would empower former presidents and vice presidents of both parties in coordination with the sitting vice president to determine if the current president is fit for office. In other words, they're talking about modifying the 25th Amendment, which takes another amendment. I don't think they're going to get that through. But here's the danger of that. We're already hearing Obama complaining about how Trump is throwing away his legacy. Having a law like this, where a current president's continuance in the job is up to his predecessors, is going to create a system where once a policy is in place, there's no changing it. Trump comes on in and he says Obamacare isn't working, which it isn't, and this human-caused global warming thing is a fraud, and all of a sudden Obama and Clinton and who knows all else say, oh, well, he's obviously unfit for the office, and they kick him out to protect their private agendas. And we know that all of these policies are set up to make certain sectors of the elite richer. Obamacare was created to benefit the health insurance industry. Human-caused global warming was out there to make people rich with carbon trading and carbon credits. I'm afraid our system is hopelessly, irrevocably, irredeemably corrupt. And our only option right now is to just sit back, disconnect from the grid as much as possible, and wait for it to destroy itself the way the former Soviet Union did. Because, to me, the parallels are obvious. The government of the United States of America is on that same track to decline and fall as the Soviet Union and, indeed, the Roman Empire itself. Frankly, I do not think it can happen soon enough. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. I'm looking at Fox News right now, and all of a sudden they're now saying Trump is saying that Iran is not living up to the nuclear deal. So there it is. We're about to have a war with Iran. These people are not going to be happy until they blow up the entire world, and then they're going to claim ownership of what little is left of it. Must have been reading their Milton. When Lucifer is cast into the pit, and he says it's better to rule in hell than to serve in heaven. So they're going to turn our entire planet into a hell and say, it's all ours. Aren't we grand? What an advanced civilization we are. A little bit of news coming out of the White House. Apparently Trump just fired Deputy White House Chief of Staff Katie Walsh. And she was the Chief of Staff's main support there. So maybe Trump is starting to get ready to try and regain some of his authority, because at this point it's obvious he's being bypassed. Whether it is Mike Pence out there talking war, or Jared Kushner trying to run the National Security Council. All right, we're going to grab some phone calls. Al in Canada, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I hope you're well. I was doing a little reading today on war and the cost of war. It's in terms of purchasing power parity. It's approaching $15 trillion a year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what a colossal waste of the global economy. And you know, it's like you said, there's no end to sight as long as these psychopaths are calling the shots, and they're becoming filthy rich over it.
Eisenhower tried to warn us. Eisenhower tried to warn us about the military-industrial complex. And what he didn't mention was that anytime you have any industry that acquires enough money, they become a complex of their own, whether it's the pharmaceutical industrial complex, the security industrial complex, and they're ripping this nation apart by simply pillaging and plundering all the wealth they can, to the point where ordinary people can't function anymore.
Yeah, I doubt the average person really even understands the the problems that exist concerning these sort of things, and nor do they care. I mean, I know a lot of people, they just don't even care. They really don't. They're just wrapped up inside their own little bubble. They have, they really can't see beyond their own life, not even their children or anything else. I mean,
well,
where does this end?
Next time you're at the supermarket checkout, look at what they put in those magazine stands. It's all gossip material, and this is telling people this is what you should concern yourself with. The lifestyles of the rich and vapid, and you have to hunt down the main magazine rack to find anything with something substantive in it, like National Geographic or anything else. And to really find out what's going on in the world, you got to go out on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who cares, if someone's getting liposuction on their tummy to stick the fat inside their butt,
Yeah, I really don't care about that stuff, it's pretty tacky. Anyway, Al, we're going to let you go and switch over to Sherry in Fredericksburg. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thanks, Mike. Two things. One, first of all, if Trump, now that he's made the unpopular choice he made, to me it'll take an act of bravery for him to do the right thing by us. He'll have to put his life on the line, perhaps, and if he does, if they snuff him out because he's willing to say, no, I'm going to stand up to this, I'm going to do what the people want because this is what they expect and this is what I want to do, then I'll have to feel admiration for that. Because, when you consider the Kennedys and then Perot, Ron Paul, and Bernie Sanders that were all forced out of position, they either force him out or they put him down. And if he's willing to be someone that's going to take that risk, then I have to admire that. number one. Number two, it's the thing about his tax returns. Now, anyone who's been in the market knows if you have a year where you really do well and there aren't many losses and the future looks pretty bright for the stocks you have, nothing's really going bad.
Okay, Sherry, I'm going to have to put you on hold. I'm going to have to put you on hold because we could do another commercial break. Do not hang up. I'm going to come right back to you. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Sherry in Fredericksburg, and we're talking about Donald Trump. And please continue where you were.
Okay, well, I just got finished saying that if it's what he gets, I've just finished saying what he gets. If it's an assassination, because he's put down, because he wants to do the right thing, I'm going to have admiration for that. And,
okay, I'm going to have to stop
you
before we go into the second thing.
Okay.
The problem is being dead is kind of permanent, and especially if you don't really believe in that idea of an afterlife, that he's going to be up there in the clouds looking down at what happens afterwards. That's really asking him for. I think it's an unreasonable request. Okay, we have to understand that if somebody is threatened with death, not just to themselves but their family, I can understand if they go along and say, "Yeah, I don't want my family, tortured to death or something like that." Now, that being said, the best thing that the American people could do is get together and simply send a message to the deep state that if anything suspicious does happen to Donald Trump, that will trigger the revolution. Okay, and that would kind of keep him safe.
Yeah, it will. Either that or just pull away and make that push. Get offline. Get this. There's antennas you can get to pick up TV. There's just push away. Don't give them any. Don't feed the beast.
Obviously the internet is the lifeblood of the independent media and the truth movement, but definitely, people want to start pulling back from all of this stuff we're enforced to be dependent on, and that's why there's now a push to lock in the dependencies, mandatory vaccines, cashless society. They're trying to slam the gate on the slave pens before any more of the slaves wake up and start saying, we've got a major issue here.
I could see that. There's going to be a tricky timing here, and I think he's going to pull through. I'm saying, for those like myself, I'm an Episcopalian. I like prayer. I think intercessory prayer works. Start praying now that if they do decide to do something that would cause him harm, that you'll be praying for him. I'm going to be praying for him. I go to bed every night, and so join me, those who have that belief system, that's a powerful energy out there. Okay, the other thing about his tax returns, okay? Mm-hmm. The way Wall Street works, the way the casino works, if you can take losses every year to offset your gains. And so if you, with these big wheeler dealers, they've got, this stock's kind of getting old hat and this new stuff's coming in. There's a new revolution in, tech and all this stuff. So they let go of old things that might be passé and might not have much movement on the stock exchange. And I will add, too, if they're in Washington and they see what laws are coming in, they can get a head start on kind of seeing which stocks are going to be hot. And I think they were caught out on that once.
Well, they're caught out on a lot. And again, one of the big problems we have is that members of Congress get away with insider trading, and they've got this key information. They actually, I think about a year and a half ago, tried to actually pass a law saying members of Congress could not use the information they learned being in Congress for their own personal investment. That, of course, got voted down completely. And even though insider trading is illegal for everybody, for some reason it is never enforced against the Congress.
Yeah, I know. Well, anyway, that's the way it goes. And if there's some year you can't take any losses because everything looks like it's on the upswing, you have to pay you have to pay your taxes. Now, I think when Bush came in, he made those capital gains cheaper, which I was real happy about. But, you know, and then I got out when I started getting scared. But anyway, here's the deal. There was, and here's a question, I don't know if we talked about it on this show or not, but there surfaced, and by illegal means, one of Trump's past tax returns. Do you have, and it showed that he had to pay millions that year.
Yeah,
and so it kind of got buried.
Okay, Sherry, it wasn't brought up by legal means. Somebody leaked it, and that is a crime in and of itself. And Rachel Maddow basically did a faceplant because they were teasing all day. We've got his tax return. We've got his tax return, and it showed that he had paid his taxes. And I don't know why they're still making a stink about it. At this point, we've got more pressing things. And again, as I've said before, I am far more interested in seeing Hillary Clinton's deleted emails than I am Donald Trump's tax returns. At this point, I really don't care. He's a huge, huge disappointment, but let's deal with what's happening right now and not get tangled up with all of this stuff that's way back in time. Sherry, I'm going to let you go. We've got other callers waiting, and we're going to switch over here to Jack in North Dakota. Jack, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello there. I listen to your show all the time, but anyhow, this is going to sound really crazy. But I come across a website, and it's about cloning. You know, they can grow human body parts in cows, and they had that deal about dollar sheep and all this stuff. But they went much deeper than that, where they actually have cloned people, you know, underground.
Well, at this point, it's illegal. They're starting to hedge up to that to make, you know, designer babies, you know, Roundup-ready babies from Monsanto and everything.
Does New World Order care about legal? You know, that's my question.
Well,
but anyhow, it's called DonaldMarshall.com, and this guy claims he is a clone, and he's trying to expose this stuff. But it's I got his information off of EducateYourself.org. Mm-hmm. And it looks, boy, I typed out, I don't have a computer, so I listened to it on the phone, but...
okay, well, Jack, a couple of things you need to understand. Dolly the Sheep was an amazing accomplishment for its day. What you don't understand is that shortly after all the news cameras had gone away, Dolly got very sick and died. The cloning process is deeply, deeply flawed. The other issue is that when you clone a human being... you can clone their body and their genetic predisposition. You cannot clone their memories. What you get is
that's why they got a patent actually on that, where they can transfer the memory also.
I seriously doubt that. I seriously doubt. Jack, listen to me. I seriously doubt that, because how our brains store information varies from individual to individual to individual. Okay, and that's why that part, I have to say, that's likely a little bit of a fantasy. So thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to No, I'm not. I've already told you what my response to this story is, okay?
Marshall.com. Just a glance at it, please.
Hang on a second. I got to send a message to my control room. Okay? All right. Now then, getting on back to the real world. As you know, one of the things Donald Trump did that I most assuredly agree with is he's trying to do a crackdown on abuse of children, especially sexual abuse. And apparently, they bagged a top Army general. So this Major General James Grazioplin has been arrested and charged with multiple counts of child rape. This according to a story out of thelastgreatstand.com. And again, I am just stunned, first of all, that anybody would behave this way toward a child. Second of all, that people in positions of power and authority, where they are public personas, they're in the public eye, why they would do something like that, and why anybody in a position of command would engage in this behavior knowing there is a risk of detection followed by blackmail. And again, there is that other question, was this guy on prescription antidepressants? Because I suspect there's probably a strong correlation between these medications and what most Americans would consider this aberrant behavior. And we know there's a correlation with use of prescription antidepressants and acts of extreme violence, suicide, mass shootings. There's a strong correlation we found between the increase in per capita consumption of prescription antidepressants and domestic violence, which doesn't make the headlines. I think we could almost see correlations with things like road rage, bar fights. These medications are not good for us. Now then, getting on over to the corporate media, you would think after all this time they would begin to realize that they need to be more clever with their lies, but they're just as reckless as they were before. And apparently CNN and the New York Times basically picked up on an item that was in social media. You've been hearing how the corporate media is saying on social media it's all fake news. Now they're using it as a source. And somebody had done a comparison of the Super Bowl winner's visit to the White House in 2015 under Obama and 2017 with Trump. And in the photo with Obama, you see the football players, and there are people up both the stairs on both sides. And on the photo with Trump, there's people behind him. The stairs are empty, and they were New York Times and CNN were saying, see, hardly anybody showed up. Nobody could be bothered. And that's not what the photos show. In 2015, Obama had the staffers going up both stairs to be in the photo op. And in 2017, you can see them seated on the ground in front. It was just a change in seating arrangements. And even the New England Patriots are out there saying, you guys are being ridiculous. We all showed up. Now, a lot of people are wondering if MSNBC is going to fire Malcolm Nance for his call for ISIS to bomb the Trump building. And yes, I agree, that is over the line. That's very much over the line. It's another reminder, corporate media is no longer about reporting the news. It's about pushing the propaganda. And an excellent example of that came out of Vanity Fair, that ran an article claiming Russians are, quote, hopeless primitives from a medieval country. I seem to recall them getting a man into space before the United States of America. In fact, right now Russia is the only country that can still launch humans into orbit. The United States can't anymore. The corporate media is out there, demonize Russia, dehumanize them. That's always an inevitable step toward a war. Dehumanize the enemy. Oh, they're primitives, they're brutes, they're gooks, they're slants, they're Japs, they're Krauts. That's what that mechanism is, to get people to stop seeing the enemy as other human beings. All right, let's grab a phone call. Ramsey in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, sir. How are you?
Doing well.
See, sir, I just want to ask you something. Earlier today, or yesterday, you talked about the UN and said that the United Nations should expel Israel from the UN organization, and I totally agree with you, sir. But the thing is, sir, the UN General Assembly and all these people, they can't do anything, because the thing is, if they do that, the Israel lobby or the Jewish lobby or in the United States is gonna boycott those countries. So,
well, somebody's going to
agree with that.
Somebody's going to have to do something, because at this point, Israel would love it if the United States and Russia were goaded into a mutually destructive nuclear war, because that would leave Israel with their nuclear arsenal able to dominate the entire Middle East, and by way of the oil revenues, basically control the rest of the world. And then the Messiah would arrive. Some such.
Yeah, but see, sir, do you agree that countries in the UN, they cannot expel Israel because Israel's influence with the United States would boycott those countries? Do you agree with that?
I think that's an overly simplistic analysis. Certainly, Israel's control over the U.S. Foreign policy is something to take into consideration, but you cannot rule out the likelihood that Israel has compromised the governments of those other countries as well, has got them infiltrated, is blackmailing them. And again, we're talking about the actions of Israel's government, not of Israel's people. But Israel's government plays real political hardball, and more than a few leaders have been caught by surprise at just how cutthroat they can be. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, getting on to the economic news, it's kind of economic, socio-political. Down in Venezuela, things are really desperate. There is no money. People are going hungry. People are rioting. And in this case, it's not a staged riot. It is everybody is just afraid. And they simply can't sit still anymore. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. And Venezuela has sort of upped the U.S. opposition by seizing a General Motors car plant. And General Motors, of course, is complaining. We're not exactly sure why Venezuela seized it. We're waiting for their side of the story. But General Motors is saying they're going to take all legal actions to defend its rights. But if they're in violation of Venezuelan law and Venezuela legally can seize the facility, maybe there's an unpaid tax, maybe there's an unpaid fee, maybe the GM executives got caught trying to bribe officials. We don't know the other side of the story. But things are definitely ramping up. Now, we are seeing, this is over in the Baltimore Post-Examiner, where Donald Trump is looking to dump Dodd-Frank. And apparently that has been a subject under discussion with many of these CEOs who are visiting the White House right now. And that would be a good thing. Unfortunately, looking at the way Trump just flip-flopped on Iran, where yesterday he was saying they were in compliance with the P5+1, and today, at least according to Fox News, Trump is saying Iran is in violation of the P5+1. So at this point, we can't take anything coming out of the White House at face value. It's basically changing with the breeze. But it would be nice if it were true. So what is Dodd-Frank? Well, again, you need to go back and understand that in the wake of the Depression of the 1930s, there was a law passed called Glass-Steagall. And what it did was throw a barrier between commercial depositor banks and investment firms in order to protect the depositors' money in the commercial banks. It's not being used for these high-risk ventures. And then when Citicorp and Travelers merged, it violated Glass-Steagall. And rather than enforce the law, they passed Dodd-Frank to say, yes, you can have single entities that are both depositor banks and high-risk investment houses, and that in turn led to the excesses of the 2000s. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're talking about the Glass-Steagall law that was passed following the 30s Depression. And it was designed to protect depositor banks where your money is put into savings accounts, or your checking account is, to protect that money from the more unstable investment banking industry. Because the blurring of those institutions was one of the reasons so many people were hurt in the Depression of the 1930s. Because as the market started to get chaotic, these firms would start dipping into the customer's money, figuring that somehow it would all work out and they could put it back, and they weren't able to put it back. So when Citicorp and Travelers merged, it was a violation of Glass-Steagall. And rather than enforce the law, Congress passed Dodd-Frank, which was locally referred to as the Citigroup Relief Act. And that led to the abuses, which led to the mortgage-backed security meltdown. And I'd like to see Glass-Steagall reinstated, although at this point the damage has been done. It's not going to roll the economy to what it was like before Dodd-Frank. The damage is already done. Now then, let's take a phone call from Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, before I go back, into what I read today about what a nuclear war would be, wasn't Glass-Steagall thrown under Slick Willie already back in before 2000?
Yeah, I think it was under his administration.
Yeah, and then Dodd-Frank came under after the 2008 crash. But
no, that is definitely not wrong. The Dodd-Frank preceded the mortgage-backed security meltdown.
All right. But what I wanted to say is, I read a article today on InfoWars website by a guy, I think he's a scientist at Los Alamos,
mm-hmm.
and he was describing what a nuclear war between the United States and Russia, even if it was just aimed at each other's nuclear silos, but probably would get worse than that. He said he doubts that there'd be any survivors in the world. He said there's be so much radiation and nuclear winter and all that maybe you might have some survivors in the southern hemisphere, but it's unlikely. So if Israel thinks that, the United States and Russia would be great for them, first of all it would take is one bomb, and that would be it for Israel. Anyway, anybody who thinks it would be a good thing is absolutely stone raving mad, because this is extremely dangerous. Another thing about Russia too, which is amazing, I don't know if you brought that out or somebody else. They spend only like $48 billion on their whole defense budget. We spend like $600 and something billion, and the Trump wants to even add more to it. And yet their military, I think, is at least the equal of ours, if not better.
Well, I'll tell you what. We're going to do a station identification. Mark, do not hang up, and I'm going to come on back and reply to some of the things that you said. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're talking with Mark in North Carolina. And, Mark, what was the next thing you wanted to mention?
Oh, by the way, I got that article here. It's by Paul Joseph Watts. He's quoting a Greg Mello, Secretary and Executive Director of the Los Alamos Study Group. It says basically there wouldn't be any survivors. Maybe some in the Southern Hemisphere, but he even doubts that.
Well, do you remember the movie On the Beach? It was a book. It was actually required reading when I went to high school. The novel of On the Beach, and then it was made into a movie, it was a very powerful anti-nuclear, anti-World War statement, where basically the film opens just after there has been a nuclear war, and the only survivors are down in Australia. The story is all about trying to see if there's anybody still left in the Northern Hemisphere and accepting the inevitability that even in Australia, they all wind up dead. The film ends with the extermination of the human race, which is kind of depressing. Whether a nuclear world war would actually exterminate all human life is debatable, but it would certainly make large numbers of them very ill, sterile. There'd be massive birth defects. It's a bad thing. One of the issues we have to deal with right now is our generation looks at nuclear detonations in a very abstract way. We've seen photos of it. We've seen the documentaries. But we don't really understand just how powerful these weapons are. And that's one of the reasons why... Go ahead.
That's one of the things I wanted to bring up, because when you and me were kids, people understood how horrible a nuclear war was. There was a lot of demonstrations on the street. Hell no, we won't go. Better red than... I didn't necessarily believe better red than dead, but certainly I wanted to do everything we could to avoid nuclear war, and that was the thinking at the time. But now I don't know. And the other question I was going to ask you too is, how does Russia keep up such a military that's probably the equivalent of maybe better than ours when they only spend $48 billion on their defense budget? We spend like $600-something billion.
Well, because the American military-industrial complex is all about war profiteering, and Russia and China, they're all about actually putting together a working military. So they're definitely getting way more bang for their buck.
Mm-hmm.
And that really does constitute the difference.
Well, what do you think of what I just explained? I said when we were kids, like these air raid drills, we knew it was nonsense. When I was in the Army, they said, what do you do in case of a nuclear attack? And said, oh, you cover yourself with your poncho and this and that. And these idiots, these what we call lifers in the Army, actually believe this stuff. But we, people, regular troops, understood, the best thing to do would be put your head between your, as far between your legs as possible, if you know what.
Yeah, kiss your rear end goodbye.
Exactly. So, I mean, we we're a lot smarter than that. So I just don't understand. You think you'd see people yelling and screaming about this now. Not to mention, even if the war doesn't go nuclear, you would need a huge draft. And you'd think these millennials and these Generation Z kids would be yelling and screaming already about that possibility.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like everybody's zombified.
They should be concerned. They should absolutely be concerned because they're going to be on the front lines. There is a bill to renew the draft sitting in committee in Congress. It's been there for a long time. It actually, at one point, had a provision for drafting women into combat roles. That was taken out under public pressure, but now it's been put back in. When they come for our children, they're coming for all of them.
You think kids, yeah, and the thing is that 18-year-olds can vote now. So, I mean, you think these politicians would get it through their heads and stop this. I just don't know. I think these people are mad. I really think we're governed by madmen. And as far as Trump goes, as far as if he's being threatened, what he should, if this is the case, he go to the American people and tell them, this is what they're doing. This is what they're trying to do. You got the largest standing army in the world in the United States. Hundreds of millions of gun owners.
Yes.
And, that would take care of the deep state or any other state if it really came down to it. And
I don't want to see that. I don't want to see that happen. I am still holding out for a Soviet Union-style collapse of the government. I don't want to see a civil war or a revolution in the streets of the United States because always the wrong people get killed and crippled in those things. It's just like foreign wars. The instigators will make a huge amount of money and they'll run off to their retirement laughing their heads off at how silly the rest of us were.
Yeah, I understand that, but we can't let them drag us into World War III either.
No, we can't, and that's why I say if we can get 300 million Americans to just stand up and tell the government we're not going to listen to you anymore, and we're not going to fight your wars anymore, and we're not going to pay for them anymore. And that was the message, when I joke about, okay, if you really feel war is necessary, here's your rifle, here's your parachute, go have fun. We're going to sit this one out. Back during Vietnam, there actually was a poster that was going around saying, what if somebody threw a war and nobody showed up? Well, that's where we have to be right now. We have to say, we're not going to show up. We're not going to show up because the American people have never really benefited from any of these wars. It's always been the politicians, the military-industrial complex, and most especially the bankers. The bankers are the ones who ultimately win all these wars because war is the richest harvest of debt for the bankers.
Well, remember the song Universal Soldier by Buffy St. Marie? I think Donovan really made it famous. Buffy St. Marie is the first one to actually write it and sing it. Basically, it's pretty much without the regular soldier, all these generals and all these politicians wouldn't be able to do anything.
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. Now, it's a little less so today because of all the oncoming robotic and automated weapons, but we're already seeing how Russia's electronic warfare can jam those systems up. Again, if you think about it, the United States government is making the same strategic mistake the Nazis did. They're over-dependent on their whiz-bang high-tech weaponry, but in the end, that is not what wins a war. Controlling the ground is what wins a war. In any event, this next war, all we're going to do is make the rubble bounce.
Well, let's just pray it doesn't happen. Let's just pray it doesn't happen because, like I said, I've got children, I've got grandchildren, I've got I want the best for them. I want this planet to survive. It's a beautiful planet. There is no global warming, but if we do have a nuclear war, it will get to global warming, something like, 10,000 degrees above Fahrenheit?
Well, no, there isn't that much. Even with all the world's nuclear weapons detonated, there's not that much. The real danger is a nuclear winter, where so much debris is thrown up into the atmosphere, the temperatures will plunge. And we've already had systems to model that on based on some of these larger volcanic eruptions we've seen over the last several decades, where there is a measurable decrease of solar radiation reaching the surface of the Earth, followed by a measurable cooling. And so a nuclear winter is a very real possibility. A nuclear global warming, much less so.
Well, like I said, I mean, you know, I'm talking about the initial blast. It's probably about 10,000 degrees above Fahrenheit.
At the core, yeah, it's a very, very high temperature. But don't forget the inverse law, the inverse square law applies as you get further and further out. The heat energy dissipates as the square of the distance. And like I went over to that nuke map application, and I simulated the dropping of nuclear weapons on the center of Pearl Harbor and how it would affect where Claire and I lived. And the good news is, if North Korea attacks Pearl Harbor with a nuclear weapon, we're going to have a really good fireworks show, and it'll probably rattle the windows. The bad news is, anything that the Russians and Chinese are currently using hits Pearl Harbor, we're just not going to survive, especially the Chinese. They use a bomb that could basically melt this entire rock.
Well, Paul Craig Roberts pretty much thinks it'll be over after.
Yeah.
You know, as a matter of fact, he kind of indicates we just lose, but I don't think there would be any winners. I think the world would lose.
Yeah, everybody's going to lose. Everybody's going to lose, and
nobody wins.
And you know something? If you think about it, you think about the wars in the past. The only ones who claim victory are the governments, the officers, and the bankers, because ordinary people on either side, they all lose anyway. And I know this because I grew up in a town that still carried the scars of World War II. And, you know, families who had lost fathers and sons and brothers and uncles in the war and were still grieving. And, of course, with the loss of those individuals was a loss in income earning capability, and so they suffered economically. And once you get away from the capital cities and the parades and all the rest of it, it becomes harder and harder to distinguish the vanquished from the victorious in terms of ordinary people and the burdens they have to bear.
I just don't understand why, you know, you think the news media would be up and, I mean, I'm not even talking about the mainstream news. The problem is, all they've got for reporters these days is these leg-crossing women that don't have no clue, and most of the guys, like these pretty boys, will also have no clue, and they just say what they're told to say, and that's it. There's no real news reporter.
They're probably they're probably being told that a nuclear war is controllable, a nuclear war is winnable, and they're clinging to that belief. Because if they don't cling to that belief, it becomes harder and harder to do their job, which is lying to the American people for profit. Anyway, we're going to let you go. I need to let you go. Got a bunch of news. Got other callers going to be calling on in. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Getting on back to the economic news. U.S. Senator John McCain is flapping his gums again, saying that Exxon is crazy for trying to resume business with Russia. You're not supposed to do business with them. You don't do business with anybody we don't want you to do business with. And I really keep wondering, isn't this guy's job supposed to be in Arizona? And yet he's all over the Middle East, and every time he shows up in the Middle East, there's a false flag gas attack weeks afterwards. So he's out there screaming to hurt everybody. I have not heard one positive, constructive comment come out of McCain's mouth in recent memory. It's always bomb somebody, sanction somebody, harm somebody, inflict pain. And I think McCain builds a very, very strong case for congressional level election fraud, because I get lots of email from people in Arizona saying, I didn't vote for this guy. I don't know anybody who did. I can't understand why he continues in office. Look at all the massive election fraud going on around the world. There's your answer. The elections are crooked. The elections are a fairy tale. It's a theater pageant put on to make you think you still have some kind of say in the running of this country, and as Paul Craig Roberts said, you do not. Harley-Davidson is announcing layoffs they're going to shift employment to Kansas City, Missouri. And I can understand the same thing that's affecting the auto sales is affecting motorcycle sales. People do not have money, and they do not feel comfortable going back into debt to buy things because of the uncertainty in the future. Although the U.S. government is saying consumer confidence is on the increase, I seriously doubt that that's an accurate assessment, mostly because they've lied about things like the unemployment rate and the rate of inflation. So why would they be truthful about consumer confidence? They need the numbers to go up to reassure you, yes, go on out and spend, spend, spend. If you're a loyal, patriotic American, you're going to max that plastic out. Subway says it shut hundreds of U.S. restaurants this last year. And they got a double whammy between their spokesman's scandals and allegations that their food is not as pure and unadulterated as the advertising suggests. But restaurants in general are in decline. People don't have the money to go out and buy things to eat. They're doing more cooking at home. It's less expensive. They also have a better understanding what's going in to what they're making in that kitchen. And the restaurant business is a serious, significant indicator of the true state of our economy. Now, Ukraine is on the brink of an energy catastrophe, and they're trying to sign a contract on coal deliveries from the United States. We're talking about the price of oil going up, going down, going sideways. But Ukraine is literally on the verge of having the lights go out over there. What a mess of the world these money junkie warmongers have done. Now, getting on to the immigration refugee situation, there's been an interesting development, and the courts have ruled now illegal aliens do not have constitutional rights of review if denied entry into the United States of America. Now, the open borders people, the refugee people, are out there saying that if a refugee is denied, they have constitutional rights. In fact, they've even gone as far as to say that illegal immigrants and refugees have a constitutional right to be here, which tells us either they are lying through their teeth or they've never actually read that Constitution. But a lot of people applying for refugee status who are turned down are trying to file lawsuits saying, I have a constitutional right to be reevaluated, and the courts have said, no, you do not. The rights in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution apply to U.S. citizens and legal residents, period, end of discussion. Now, there's another story that came on out from 12160. Trump demands for border wall funding may force a government shutdown next week, which is being greeted with a tremendous amount of cheering and joy by the American people. Not so much the border wall as having the government shut down, because if they're shut down, think how much harm they're no longer able to do to the rest of us. But it's basically a standoff between Donald Trump, who's demanding that the new budget include funding for the wall, and mostly the Democrats in Congress who are saying, no, we don't need to fund the wall. Now, I'm all in favor of controlling our borders. I don't think we really need that wall. And by the way, some of the opposition to the wall is getting downright silly. Somebody tried to file an environmental lawsuit against the wall because it would interfere with the transit patterns of jaguars in birds. I have a clue for you. Birds can actually fly over that wall. And better than 99% of the jaguars already live south of the border anyway. Let's keep them down there, because jaguars will eat farm animals and the occasional child. I remember many, many years ago when I was married to my first wife, and times were much better, and we went down to this for a vacation to this resort called Lasadas, which, if you ever saw the movie 10 with Bo Derek, that beachside resort, that's where we went. And while we were there, we were told in no uncertain terms, do not go outside the fence. There's a jaguar on the grounds, and he will attack you. So that's the jaguar situation. But we really don't need a wall. All we need to do is enforce the existing immigration laws and cut off the financial incentives luring these people here. Just come on down hard and say, no, you do not get free stuff. You do not get jobs. You do not get handouts. If you cross that border illegally, the only thing you're going to do is starve to death in the streets of the United States of America. If you do that, they're going to stop coming here. And I still think it's cheaper to put crocodiles in the Rio Grande. Now then. Over in Great Britain, as you know, they're still going over the Brexit, and apparently there's going to be a big fight with Theresa May's general election this summer. The vote riggers are already signing up for overtime to try and reshape Parliament into something that will end Brexit. Tony Blair is in there trying to end this thing. They still believe in the New World Order and the global government. Brussels is now demanding an annual hike in the UK's divorce payment. In other words, Brussels is okay with Great Britain going back to being independent. What they can't live without is Britain's money pouring in to prop up all the failed European Union member states. And they want to hardwire that in, that Great Britain is going to continue to loot their own taxpayers and businesses to prop up all these European Union member states and keep that European Central Bank happy and contented and wealthy beyond dreams of Midas. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're getting a clarification on Donald Trump or whoever is making these calls for him. Because yesterday Donald Trump was saying that Iran is in compliance with the P5+1 nuclear deal, and everybody else like John McCain was saying, no, we got to sanction them, we've got to do this, they're doing things we don't like that weren't part of the original deal, but that doesn't matter, let's, renege on the deal, keep the sanctions in place. And then we had earlier Fox News, Trump, Iran not in compliance with the nuclear deal, and everybody's saying, what the heck is going on here? So now there's been a clarification. And what Donald Trump, or whoever's making these decisions for him, meant to say is that Iran is in compliance with the P5+1 deal, but they're not living up to the spirit of the deal. What the heck does that mean? It means they brought out the bovine excrement howitzer, and it's aimed right at you. In other words, what they're trying to create is saying, we acknowledge Iran has kept all of the promises of the P5+1 deal, but we don't think we should have to keep ours. And it's, first of all, obvious that they're trying to gear up to go into Iran, as Wesley Clark told us they were going to do. But the downside is, it is reinforcing the global impression that you can take nothing coming out of the United States government at face value. It's going to be a lie. Now, yesterday we were talking about how this psychologist who works at a clinic for transgendered children came on out with the announcement that, as far as he could tell, most children were just faking it. That very few were genuinely transgendered because it's a hip thing now. And over at governmentslaves.info, they have this story where schools are now being advised to bake a cake and have a party in class to celebrate transgender students' transition. And this glorification of transgenderism is going to lead to attention-seeking kids claiming to be transgender when they are not. And it's part of a larger program of destroying our sense of self to make us easier to control under the New World Order. They want to get us confused about what language we're supposed to be using here because of all the refugees and immigrants. What are we supposed to think? Which bathroom we're supposed to use? They're deliberately confusing our kids. They don't know what gender they're supposed to be. Well, I got a news flash. It's not up to you. It's determined by your DNA. And if your DNA says you're male, you're male. And if your DNA says you're female, you're female. And if you think something else is going on, it's probably been imposed on you from outside. Another story of political correctness out of control. 12160.info. Apparently, there is a college that is going to put white people in separate rooms for what is called a privilege workshop. And apparently the university is out there being very defensive, saying that you shouldn't think this is segregation to put the white people in a separate room. Yeah, it is segregation. And it's no more right to segregate whites than it was to do the blacks. Now that brings me to a movie that we saw the other day, Hidden Figures. And when it first came on out, I made a point of saying this story was overly politicized, and it's about these black women who played a very significant role in the early Mercury program. But being very familiar with NASA, and yeah, there were individuals who were racist back then because of their upbringing, but NASA as an institution wasn't. And the story was really over-politicized. And if you read those end comments about how these women went on to very important positions and had buildings named after them, it sort of undermines this idea that they were being discriminated against. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And yeah, it looks like they're gunning to start some kind of a war with Iran any way they can. Now they're making a big deal about two Iranian Americans being held in Iran, Bakir and Simak Namazi. It's a father and son. And they were not included as part of a prisoner release that was part of the P5+1. And so they're out there saying Iran needs to release them. How could they be holding these people, like they're hostages? The part they're not saying is these gentlemen were arrested and convicted of spying on Iran for the United States of America. And they've been sentenced to 10 years in prison. Now they're trying to make a big deal. Oh, how could Iran be hanging on to these people? We need to bring them home, even if it means invading the country. They're grasping at anything they're going to get traction with. And that's going to be a really hard thing to do. Maybe they're going to set off the nuke in New York City and claim Iran nuked us. But again, that's ridiculous. No nation on earth is going to haul off and launch a nuclear weapon at the United States of America, or for that matter, Israel, because the retaliation would reduce that nation to a puddle of radioactive green glowing glass. Now, world leaders tend to have monstrous egos, without exception. And they all go to sleep at night dreaming of the future in their nation, where school children are going to be forced to memorize their names and birth dates, and they're going to see their faces on statues and coins and postage stamps. And they don't want to let that go away. Rulers who destroy their own nation are not looked on kindly by those who survive. And again, look back over the last 16 years. Who is invading other nations? Who's regime changing other nations? Who's attacking and drone striking other nations? Who's parking their military on the borders of every other nation on earth? That's the aggressor. And I know you don't like to hear it. I get all kinds of email from people saying, no, we can't be the bad guys. We're always the good guys. No. Maybe you need to surrender that idea of a good nation or a bad nation and just realize it's the world's money junkies fighting amongst each other for a bigger chunk of the planet's wealth, and you and your children are just expendable pieces in that great game. Because that's the way they see it. Now then, apparently Facebook is scrambling to shut down pro-Marine Le Pen accounts before the election. And then Facebook made a statement to Agent France Press saying they're trying to reduce the amount of material that is fake news. No, they're not. They're engaging in electioneering. Now, I noticed something very, very interesting about Facebook and Google. They've got that little button now, is this fake news? Why don't we get one of those buttons on the corporate media channels? Why don't we have those buttons embedded in the forehead of all of our politicians? So that when they lie to us, we can push the button, yeah, it's a lie. I think that would do a great service to the American people. I remember when it was still possible to buy these voice stress analyzers. And they are surprisingly accurate. certainly more so than a polygraph. Sort of gets you into that the Jim Carrey movie Liar Liar, where for 24 hours he can't tell a lie. I'd sure like to see that hit some of our politicians and our talking heads at the corporate media. That would be fun. I'd pay to see that. Unfortunately, corporate media and our government have a very simple principle of operation. If at first you don't succeed, lie again. If the lie is big enough and horrific enough, the people will believe it. It's called the big lie technique. Now, the FBI has launched a hunt for the insider who leaked the Vault 7 CIA documents to WikiLeaks. Now, this is after the head of the CIA came on out and declared WikiLeaks is a non-state hostile intelligence service abetted by Russia, and implying that Russia hacked the CIA and gave the documents to WikiLeaks. Well, now, by saying they're looking for an insider who was the leak, they're admitting it wasn't the Russians. Ooh, shock of all shock. It wasn't the Russians. Oh my goodness, the government lied to us again to make the Russians look bad. And all they succeeded in doing was making themselves look bad. Now here's a story that's as close to gray as you're going to hear, and it's coming out of Blacklisted News. And apparently there was this 75-year-old woman who was trying to sell a paperweight containing a speck of moon rock from the Apollo missions. And apparently she was detained for 2 hours in a public parking lot, and she was forced to wet her pants, and they didn't let her go and change. And she's all upset, and she's ready to sue. And maybe they could have treated her a lot better. But the issue of the Apollo moon rocks is a very complicated one. It is actually against federal law to be in possession of an Apollo moon rock. Those are considered the property of NASA, the U.S. government, and collectively, not individually, the American people. But a lot of those rocks have gotten out. And NASA kind of undercut itself, and so did the U.S. government, because as part of the post-Apollo, look how good we are, bits of moon rock were presented as gifts, government to other world leaders. And apparently a lot of those went missing when those leaders retired and are presumably still in their personal possession, even though it was supposed to be a gift from nation to nation. And NASA did give out paperweights to certain key individuals, and this lady claims to have inherited this paperweight from one of those. And so in her mind, it is legally hers, and it's a gray area. So how they treated her was definitely not cool. Her possession of that Apollo moon rock is in a very legal gray zone because it's illegal, but yet NASA was giving them out. Now, one of the good news about all of the landings on both the moon and Mars is we've come to understand that bits of moon rock can be found all over planet Earth in the form of meteorites. Certain classes of meteorites are now known to come from the moon and Mars because we've been able to actually analyze the material on the moon and Mars and say, hey, this is the same stuff. And you can actually go out on places like eBay and buy a little tiny chip of the moon or Mars, and it's perfectly legal to own. All right, let's talk about health and vaccines. It's getting really ugly out there. And again, we're subject to this abuse, we're subject to this danger because it makes money. And as long as it makes money, it is a blessed thing in our society. So there's an article over at realpharmacy.com pointing out that the United States of America has the highest vaccination rate in the world and some of the worst health. And our health is ranked 34th in the world, with infant mortality, with the highest rates of vaccination. And there has to be a question asked, is this stuff really safe? Is it even really necessary? Another article on the same thing from Activist Post. Is there vaccine cause and correlation regarding the dramatic rise in children's chronic diseases? Because if you plot it on out, as more and more vaccines are made mandatory, more and more children are coming down with chronic disorders that they're never rid of. And underscoring that is another story that's coming out of needtoknow.news. Dr. David Brownstein is saying that there's a study showing that the 2-dose vaccine for chickenpox is now linked to shingles. Now, supposedly, if you have chickenpox, you will get shingles. You're not supposed to get shingles from the chickenpox vaccine, and it's now an epidemic among children. And shingles is actually far more serious and life-threatening than chickenpox itself. But it's making billions of dollars, and that's all that really counts. The oligarchy that runs this country sees you, the American people, as walking wallets to be harvested from. And that makes it okay to sell you, force you to buy dangerous products that maybe you didn't want. And they're really pushing hard. Right now, there are 134 pro-vaccine bills now active in 35 states. It's all politics and corruption. Now, Associated Press is reporting that Dow Chemical is pushing the Trump administration, and by the way, Dow did donate $1 million to the inauguration, and they're pushing the Trump administration to basically scrap regulations and ignore the findings of federal scientists who point to a family of widely used pesticides as harmful to about 1,800 critically threatened or endangered species, and possibly to human beings as well. But the money speaks and the government listens, and so these toxic pesticides will continue. Now, if you have a garden, there is something you might want to look at, because believe it or not, farmers in India are using Coca-Cola and Pepsi as a cheaper alternative to pesticides. And this actually does work, not just with Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Any sugary soft drink is going to work. Not artificial sweeteners, not aspartame. What happens is you sprinkle this, and it attracts ants. The ants then eat the larvae of larger pests before they mature into crop-chumping adults. It actually does work. So if you don't want to have Roundup on your garden, you don't want to have these Dow chemicals and all this other toxic things, you can actually control pests on your plants. You're going to have to put up with the ants, obviously. But you can use sugary soft drinks. And certainly they're far less toxic than things like Roundup, which is a known carcinogen. A lot of people complain about the sugar in Coke and Pepsi and the rest of it, but so far I don't think anybody's linked them with cancer. Here's a little bit of a tragedy for science. Apparently there has been a malfunction, catastrophic, in this freezer where ice cores that were taken going back to the 1970s were being stored to study the last 22,000 years of climate records. And it was a brand new facility. That's the fun thing. $3.1 million. And apparently it didn't have a backup cooling system. And it caused all of these cylindrical ice cores to melt, basically destroying their value as any kind of supportive evidence for climate studies. Or maybe Al Gore pulled the fuse, because those climate studies are showing that Earth's climate is changing all the time without human influence. Now, as if those poor people over there weren't dealing with enough, there's a volcano in North Korea, Mount Paektu. And it is a really large volcano. You can find it on Google Earth. It's got a violent past. The last major eruption significantly changed the landscape around that mountain, and scientists are saying it looks like it's about to blow again. And this will be another eruption that will be heavy enough to slightly darken the skies and cause a little bit of cooling. So that's definitely coming up there as well. Okay, looking at the news here, President Trump's or whoever's talking for him, his flapper, says he doesn't see a role for the USA in Libya. Well, let's look at what's going on in Yemen, where up until recently it was all between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and now all of a sudden they're talking about direct U.S. forces on the ground. So this is another statement that we should ignore, because all of this is following that plan Wesley Clark revealed all those years ago. It's a policy of the U.S. government, and apparently the president is unable to resist that policy. And it may be that he has been brought to understand, without conquering all the resource-rich areas of the world and shackling them to the dollar, a U.S. economic implosion is now inevitable. And Trump doesn't want to be the president of a nation that's collapsing. Looks bad in the history books. So he's going to go along with it. And this agenda has gone so far, it's past the point of no return. They can't turn around and say, well, this was a bad idea, let's go on back, without the economy imploding immediately. And again, remembering that governments actually operate like religions. They need the faith and belief of the masses. It looks bad when you admit that you've done something wrong and need to change a policy. And that's one of the major reasons bad policies persist. It's a combination of those who are profiting from the policy not wanting to give up that cash flow, coupled with the government needing to maintain the illusion of infallibility. Governmental infallibility. No matter how badly we mess up, it's a success. Interesting little story. This is coming out of the Times of Israel. Israeli intelligence seen as central to the U.S. case against Syria. And either Israel wants to take credit for it, or the U.S. is trying to shift the blame for what is obviously a bogus story. But Israel is insisting that they intercepted radio chatter, a phone call from Assad to the pilot saying, go ahead and gas those people in Idlib. And you need to remember that in 2013 and 2014, Israel again claimed they had evidence that Assad had done it, only to be refuted by the United Nations, who said it was the rebels. And we need to remember that Israel is the nation that has the motto, by way of deception, thou shalt conquer. Israel originally claimed it was Egypt attacking the USS Liberty. Then there was the Levant affair, where Israeli agents were bombing British and American assets in Egypt and planting evidence to frame Egyptian Muslims. They got caught because one of the bombs detonated prematurely, and the Israeli agent was caught by the police. Israel's response, oh, it's an anti-Semitic plot to make us look bad. Oh, and then eventually they were forced to say, yeah, it was us. And then years later, all of those Israeli agents were decorated and treated like heroes. It's becoming very hard to find anything in this world that you know absolutely is true or accurate. We live in a sea of lies. It's as bad as the Matrix. We look at these flat screens and we think this is the real world, and it isn't. And I think that's the reason the Matrix franchise was so successful. People understood at some level it is a metaphor for current life. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today, and a reminder that the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 tomorrow. She had to miss last week because of Good Friday, but got a lot of email saying how much people miss her. So she will be back tomorrow. Now then, apparently, this is just now breaking, U.S. authorities have prepared charges to seek the arrest of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Coming out of CNN. And the Department of Justice wants to charge Julian Assange over the CIA leaks. But this is all coming out of a grand jury that Obama kept going into 2017. So this started a while back, and now they're ramping it up. Now, if somebody inside the CIA leaked the documents, that's the one who should legally be in jeopardy. And they have to understand that when you leak something like that, you are breaking the law. And yes, you're doing a public service. The people have a right to know when the government has gone rogue, as this one has. But I think they want to try and make an example out of Julian Assange. Because, again, the U.S. government, the corporate media, the oligarchs understand the illusion they maintained for decades, for you, the American people, has been shattered. And you're starting to see the true nature of what this government is, and it is very ugly indeed. Spying on everybody, use of torture, use of chemical weapons, provoking wars on the basis of lies, fraud, and deception. And leakers are instrumental in informing the American people what's going on, whether it was Seth Rich and the DNC emails, and obviously they can't arrest and prosecute Seth Rich. He's been killed. They're after that. Now then, getting on back to this idea about abusing children. Apparently, yesterday, former NYPD Sergeant Alberto Randazzo was sentenced to nearly 3 decades in prison for sexual exploitation and child pornography. And you remember when Jeff Epstein's house in Palm Beach got raided, and the pictures on the wall, some of them were so gross they had to blur them out before they could even be broadcast. And finally, another story coming out of the BBC, a drug given to pregnant women for epilepsy and bipolar disorder caused serious malformations in up to 4,100 children. This is coming out of a French study. The drug is called valproate. And women who were given this for epilepsy were up to 4 times likelier to give birth to a seriously malformed child. It's another thalidomide scandal. Again, our medical industrial complex, it's all about pushing product, selling product. And they've lost all sense of, are we actually making people healthier? Because healthy people can't be made profit from. They need you sick. That's the model. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. We'll be back tomorrow, Friday, with the lovely Lady Claire here on RBN. Until then, please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. We are literally in a fight against war. And in the modern nuclear age, the enemy is war itself. We've got to stop this. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.